vai cantar carnaval. Oh, there's so much in life for you to feel. Unbound and white and red and yellow.
Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And probably 4 years ago or so, I had really one of the most immaculate divine interventions. I talked to my dear friend and guitar player, Jerry Cortez, who currently plays with the Tower of Power. And we had a great interview on my radio show. And I asked him about getting a hold of David Morgan, because David had been off the grid for a variety of reasons for a long time, musically and personally. But I loved his playing, with Santana and with other bands as well, the bands I wasn't even aware of at the time. And Jerry said, well, I'll reach out to him. We'll see what happens. And really, as the divine nature of life, Morgan accepted. And it's begun a beautiful relationship and conversational relationship, personal relationship. We've done several interviews, and along the way, he talked very highly of one of his compadres who he would be cooking the groove with while his mom was making beef stroganoff in the kitchen. And this cat is really steeped in I think in the indigenous rhythms of his family, I think it's fair to say. That these rhythms stretch back through the rhythms of diaspora, the communication of the slaves, and the idea that the drum has an absolutely transcendent and magical power that seems to be stifled more and more in Western culture. And it's one of the major reasons I do my show is liberation through rhythm. Rhythm is love. Jon Otis Jr., welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's really an honor to have you.
Before we start, can I correct something before we start?
Go right ahead.
Okay, I am not Johnny Otis Jr. That is my brother, my half-brother, Shuggy Otis. But many people think I'm Johnny Otis Jr. So I just wanted to clear that.
So you're just Jon Otis.
I'm Daryl Jon Otis. That's the name that my mom gave me, Gladys Moffett. And I grew up with her. I didn't grow up with my dad, Johnny Otis. And Shuggy, my half-brother, is Johnny Otis Jr. But by some strange twist of fate, everybody thinks I'm Johnny Otis Jr.
Well, I mean, it's just bizarre. Well, thank you for enlightening me to that, because I was always a little bit confused myself, because, I mean, Shuggy, I always thought that was his name, Shuggy, and yeah, it would make sense. This is John Daryl. But Jon Otis. That's but you're. I just wanted to ask you about how much education you had about cats like Toussaint Louverture. When did you get hip to these guys from Haiti that would not allow Napoleon to penetrate the shores of Haiti because of the frenzied nature of how he inspired his people through the drum? Those cats had sticks and stones and rocks, and the French had, cannons and guns, and they couldn't penetrate Haiti. And I'm just, to me, it's like, this is where the rubber meets the road on my show, and I kind of wanted to just know from your point of view how the education of the lineage of the drum, how quickly that was instilled in you.
Well, I didn't really know that much about him per se, but as a teenager and a young adult, I did read a little bit of history about him. So I knew more surface stuff about him particularly, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, so I mean, why don't you talk, when did you, when you started to do history, what was revelatory to you?
Well, from what you're talking about, what was revelatory was how much the drum which is an oral tradition from Africa, at least from West Africa, was really obscured once it reached the shores of North and South America and the Caribbean. And I don't really know that much historically about it, but it just kind of permeates our culture, that our American culture, our modern American culture, that particular thing, the drum, was really just shoved practically under the table. Music was outlawed in slavery, through Jim Crow and everything after that. It was just pretty much pushed aside. I guess along with blues and jazz, it finally started to resurface. And finally, in modern times, practically everyone understands the historical, relevance and what really happened. But, it's not really talked about that much.
Yeah, I would disagree. I don't think a lot of people do know the history of it. I mean, I think there were drums.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Okay.
here's my point. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the idea of descarga, or the idea of the spiritual breaking of the cranium through percussion, and how early on you were able to transcend your physical body playing constant rhythms all day long. What was that like? Because your generation, and even prior to that, Bray Mantilla, Candido, there were the Puerto Rican neighborhoods, the Latin neighborhoods, the black, everybody had conga drums. Everybody. And now it's those neighborhoods, they're not there anymore. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But can you talk about the first time that you truly left your physical body playing the rhythms that you learned?
Yeah, I started off playing percussion at the University of California in Berkeley. I grew up in Berkeley with my mom. At Sproul Plaza, which is this plaza. Every Saturday and Sunday there would be drum circles, not just one, but multiple ones of people from different cultures, and then one big giant one where it was just kind of a free-for-all that we all like to call the Thunder Drummers. But that was my first real experience with playing hand drums with other people. And I guess I started off at about 9 years old. So that would have been, around 1960, 61, something like that. And, I don't really remember it as an out-of-body experience, but I do really remember it as something that just pulled me like a magnet.
Yes.
And I would go there, like, pretty much, I'm not really a religious person per se. I don't go to church. I don't belong to any one particular religion. But that weekend of drumming would pull me literally every weekend up there. And I guess one of my greatest experiences was being taken under the wing of Armando Peraza, the incredible Cuban percussionist who ended up playing with Santana, but who played with so many incredible Cuban groups, finally moved to the United States, played with Cal Jader and other great, I think George Shearing also, other great musicians. He would visit Sproul Plaza every now and then and kind of stand around and shake his head and look at all the different groups we were all just trying to figure out what was really going on. And I remember this just so fondly, him grabbing me and going, "You play precise." Those were his exact words. You play really precise. That just, as a young percussionist, that so touched me. And that kind of pulled me along through the rest of my career, just those couple of few words.
Well, I mean, that's profound. That's profound, feedback from a master.
Yeah, absolutely. And I considered myself fairly lost in that because I didn't grow up in that culture, and I really learned it by just trying to get as close to it as I could. I never really learned how to speak Spanish properly. I never really played that much in salsa bands, even though I did have a couple of experiences playing with salsa and Afro-Cuban musicians. But I was not really in that many bands. So to have him say that to me just was such an inspiration, and that really carried me a long way through my whole career.
Well, so you said it was the Sons of the Drum. What was the name of that group? That at the
at Sproul Plaza that I was talking about.
Yeah.
We called them the Thunder Drummers, which was basically kind of a free for all. It was like many people who were from many different cultures that were just kind of free forming it, at Sproul Plaza on the weekend. And it was really pretty chaotic, but at the same time, everyone would kind of find a groove together, and it would kind of sputter in, go for a while, kind of sputter out. And, as I started to learn rhythms, from Brazil, from Cuba, from Africa, from Haiti, as I started to really learn different rhythms, me and my friends would kind of deridingly call this big chaotic group the Thunder Drummers. We're not even really thinking that much about what we were calling them. But it was more like our way of saying that they were really chaotic, and we were kind of chuckling at them. But it was, in the beginning for me, it was a great source of just being able to jump in and play and have a chance.
We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. That you may recognize this voice, but just pay attention to the content, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
We played mostly at assemblies and after-school things and stuff like that. But once we got out of school, we started playing clubs. And back then, if you look at, back in the 50s, there were so many clubs to play in because they were jazz clubs. And that was the thing. I think our main focus, too, was to play jazz, because that's the music I wanted to be a jazz player, a jazz saxophone player. And of course, Ed, although he could play a lot of other things, but he was really into jazz because he used to listen to Bud Powell all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for us, that's the term of Latin jazz. That's the one that locked us into that style of music, because we were able to incorporate jazz with the Latin rhythms, and playing and listening to people like Cal Jader and of course George Shearing, and once Armando Peraza moved here to San Francisco, became friends with Armando. Of course, I played with him with Santana for many years, but all these guys, they get to the Bay Area and they so wanted to live there because it was different than living in New York and or anywhere else. They really liked the vibe of the Bay Area, because everyone at that time, there was so much music going on. And once the rock scene came into play with Carlos and all the rock bands, Journey and all those bands that were in the Bay Area at the time, and Bill Graham brought so much to that scene and helped Carlos get going, to get started in the music business. It kind of went that way, into the Latin rock scene. But even though we used some of that, at the same time, though, we were actually gearing more to Latin jazz.
John, you have any idea who that is?
The voice sounds so familiar, but I really can't place it. For a second, I was like, is that Cannonball? Because it sounds really a lot like Cannonball Adderley, but I know it's not Cannonball.
No, it's not. I didn't. Unfortunately, I
really
didn't. No, that's one of your brothers, an elder statesman. That was my interview with Pete Escovedo.
Oh, okay, that was Pete.
It was Pete.
Yeah, no, I totally didn't recognize.
Yeah, and when you can you talk a little bit about how the music fundamentally, I mean, I don't know, did you actually play a trap set, or were you mainly just a percussionist? And then when you first started, because here's the confounding thing for me, is that at just turning 42 years old, and I did a roundtable discussion at the Brava Theater in in the Mission District last year with Greg Rico and Michael Shreve celebrating Woodstock 50th. And the amazing thing is that Santana had no product out. They didn't have one record out at Woodstock. That was all done through a cassette tape by Bill Graham to the promoter of Woodstock, and then they chose Santana. And that was really the first time the East Coast, in my mind, heard anything that would be described as Latin rock. I mean, before that, there was the Palladium, and you had salsa music, and Tito Puente, and you had Machito, and you had, like you said, George Shearing and Al McKibben and Armando Peraza, but that was all acoustic stuff. And then all of a sudden it became Latin rock. And I'm just trying to figure out, stylistically, how did your playing change? Going from, was essentially salsa, Latin jazz to Latin rock.
Yeah, well, let me go back and first say I started off on the drums, and I got my first drums from my dad, Johnny Otis, when I was around 7 years old. I didn't grow up with my dad, but he gave me some drums, and that got me started. Around the same time as I got these drums, just by chance, I was watching TV one night, and Catherine Dunham and her dance group came on TV.
Sure.
And I was just mesmerized by the percussionists and the dancers. And from that point on, even though all I was playing was drums, from that point on, I was like, I want to do that. So that got me really interested in hand drums. And that was even before I started playing hand drums, but that got me interested. I didn't really start playing hand drums and congas until I was a teenager. And it took me a while to kind of branch, or I don't want to say branch, but connect between what I was doing on the drum set, which was I was learning more kind of rhythm and blues, rock, and a little bit of jazz-based things, and hearing Catherine Dunham's percussionist, and then finally years later starting to see what was emerging in San Francisco was really an inspiration for me to start trying to find some connection between what I was doing and these other rhythms that were coming out of Africa, Cuba, Haiti, Brazil, Caribbean.
Were there, so, I mean, your father has a lot of acclaim as a performer, but he was an absentee father. He was not in your life.
No. Well, let's say he was a little bit in my life, but I grew up with my mom.
Right, and your mother, yeah, and I wonder, like, for your brother, were all your brothers grew up with your mother, is that right? I mean, is your dad involved with was he involved with any of them?
No, all of no, I'm the only kid from my mother, Gladys Moffett. My half brothers and sisters grew up with my dad and his wife, Phyllis, in Los Angeles.
Interesting. So were you, like, I guess, were you early on, you were looking to carve your own path, but how much did you, like, hear about your father, not from anybody else other than just, like, TV, the Johnny Otis show, the radio, the music? I mean, and if you can talk a little bit about maybe how you felt at that time and ultimately how you maybe made it a commitment to yourself to be your own person and to let go of the ego and as painful as it is, even though your dad wasn't in your life and you would have probably liked that, he wasn't. So, I mean, can you talk about that evolution? Because to me, it's like a pretty common thing all over the world. I mean, I definitely don't understand it, but it's a problem. And just because of the fact your dad was basically a star, I wonder if you, how you basically decided, I'm just going to take my own trip on this.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, the first real connection with my dad and music was my dad had one of the first shows, so it didn't really have national coverage, but I was staying with my godparents in Los Angeles, and the show came on, and my godmother was like, look, your dad, this is your dad. And I was like mesmerized. I was like 5 years old, totally mesmerized in front of the TV, watching my dad play the drums and be, like the MC and having his own show. So that, that made an incredible impression on me. growing up with my mom in Berkeley, there were moments where I felt kind of like sad, seeing my other friends, neighbors who had, both parents in the house. So I kind of had this little chip on my shoulder about, being a little sad about not having a dad. But he would periodically visit us, and so I had a little bit of connection with him. It's really, that's a hard one to talk about, actually, because I was really feeling kind of a void of not having him in my life, but at the same time, having discovered his music at such an early age and then really continuing to discover what he was doing along the way kind of gave me a connection to him. At the age of 16, I literally hitchhiked from Berkeley to Los Angeles and just showed up on his door and really got to know him finally.
Wow. See, that's been on my mind since we set up this interview. I mean, what was that experience? Did you kind of just fall in sync right away? I mean, when you showed up there, I mean, he seemed like
yeah. Well, first
ahead.
of all, my mom was like, "You're doing what? You're hitchhiking where?" And then when she found
yeah,
out,
no, I mean, people still hitchhiked back then, though. It was safe to hitchhike. It was safe
exactly.
to, yeah.
When she saw I was serious, she was like, "Okay, let me give you a little money. Be safe." So I literally hitchhiked with my friend Tony to Los Angeles. We stayed with a friend of his the night before we made it to my dad's house. I showed up on my dad's porch, literally as his wife was walking up coming home from work. So he was kind of nervously, he had me out on the porch.
Right.
Basically, he wasn't sure whether he should let me in the house or not because he was totally shocked to see me.
Wow.
And his wife walks up and goes, "Daryl John?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Why are you guys standing out on the porch? Come on into the house." So she was immediately just a sweetheart.
What an awesome thing.
Pulled me in the house. Yeah, well, how so cool. And I ended up staying with them for like 2 or 3 days. So that was my first real experience of getting to know my dad.
I mean, geez, that was kind of a mind-blowing story right there. So, I mean, it's fair to say that that you spent a few days there, and then over time you guys got you continued to have a close relationship up till his passing. I mean, what I'm trying to get at is like the lineage. It's one of the most profound lineages. I mean, for you at 5 years old to be, watching TV, all 3 channels or whatever it was, and then, there's your dad, there's the television show, and he's playing, and I just can't even imagine that kind of, I mean, that's like a foggy dream or real or not, and then, sort of your hunger to connect with him on a more intimate level just because you loved the drums and you could feel the rhythm and you were playing as a professional musician. Where did the relationship...
let me go back.
Go ahead.
Can I go back and fill
You do whatever you want, man. Yeah.
So the year after I met him in Los Angeles, he had a performance at the Monterey Jazz Festival in 1970. And I, once again, hitchhiked to Monterey, spent the night in the bushes of Monterey Airport, and met my dad when his flight arrived the next day.
Wait, hold on. You were sleeping under a bush or something?
I literally hitchhiked from Berkeley.
Oh, this is the best. This is the greatest story I've ever heard in my life.
The night before the concert that my dad played at the Monterey Jazz Festival. And then I met my dad at the Monterey Airport when he flew in that day, the day of the concert. And then stayed with him. He got me into the gig. I got me into the jazz festival. And I just met so many incredible people, including Joe Jones. I got to hang out backstage with Joe Jones.
No way. Papa Joe?
Yes. Oh. And what an incredible experience that was for me at that age. Just totally. I got to meet my 5-year younger brother, Nick Otis, who is an incredible drummer himself.
Wow.
That experience at the Monterey Jazz Festival was another incredible experience, meeting legends. Just the people that were on the stage with my dad that day was mind-blowing. Joe Turner and just a whole bunch of other incredible people. And then years later, 1976, my dad asked me to play with his band. So I played with his band for about a year. and we did a couple of small tours. And my brother Shuggy was in the band at that point, and that's when I really got to know Shuggy finally. So I finally did connect with my dad professionally as a musician with that tour and playing with my dad.
Again, I just want to be clear. Shuggy was your half brother, right?
He's my half brother.
Okay, I just want you. I'm trying to. You're the only son, child of your mom and your dad.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
What was it like to make love on the bandstand with your family? The Escovedo brothers, man, those guys were raised by Benny Velarde and the cat who could actually play serious bongos and congas was Al McKibben, who played with Peraza, right?
Right.
Those guys
Right.
were like freaking mentors. Now that, your situation was more like you just put yourself out in the quad and it was like, and people were just banging, having a ball and you were learning rhythms and obviously you had good time feel and, obviously Peraza told you that. But when you, can you talk about, is it even possible to put into words what it's like when the family blood is cooking the groove on the bandstand?
Well, I was pretty intimidated by my dad. At the same time as I was really excited to play in his band, and I was totally shocked that he even asked me because I didn't even consider myself on that level at that point. I was maybe, 20, 21 years old, 20 to 21. It was super intimidating. So as I think back on it, I have really fond memories, but as I was standing there in my shoes, I was totally intimidated and really kind of afraid of the whole experience because I didn't really think I was good enough to be there. And my dad, being the outgoing person that he is, kind of the center of attention, I was just kind of, I don't know any other word to say, was intimidated.
Sure, no, but I mean, like a lot of times, well, and you know better than anybody, and I can completely understand it because, but at a certain point, did you feel like that release where it was like, well, you dropped out of your mind down to your heart into your primordial gut and just started to just burn?
Yeah, and that was literally on the bandstand with these incredible musicians like Eddie Cleanhead Vincent.
Oh my God, that is so insane. See, why not? Why not?
Yeah, basically on tour, Eddie took me under his wing, and I hung out with him, and we shared hotel rooms a lot on that.
Cleanhead?
Tour. And he just
Cleanhead?
Yes, he just.
Dude.
Yes, he had such great stories. And he was such an incredible, warm person. He's the guy who actually made me feel not so intimidated, because he literally took me under his wing and talked to me and joked with me and criticized me and was just real with me. Whereas my dad was the band leader, and he had a whole lot of other issues that he had to deal with being the band leader. And, being my dad was kind of secondary at that point, in a sense, because I never really grew up with him, so I didn't really have that kind of father-son respect. I don't want to say, respect. I don't mean like I respected him in any case. I just didn't have that father-son connection.
Yeah, but there was no bond. There was no real bond. I get it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Eddie Cleanhead Vincent just made me feel like a part of this incredible musical family that I didn't really realize I was a part of.
This is the most incredible thing. Wait, Eddie was playing. First of all, Eddie Cleanhead Vincent, for the audience listening, wrote some of the most legendary tunes that Miles Davis ripped from him. But Eddie was so...
Yeah, that's what he told me.
Oh, no, it's the real deal. I mean, I'm going to pull up the quote right now, but that dude was more into partying and having a good time than advocating for publishing rights, and Miles ripped him. Miles ripped Bill Evans, too. I mean, Miles was the man, but, we all have our demons. So you're telling me that Cleanhead was in your dad's band?
Yes, he was.
Oh, my God. That is insane.
I knew nothing about Cleanhead Vincent until I was in this band.
Dude, Cleanhead is so, his presence is here, man. I cannot believe he took you under your wing. It's unreal.
He told it to me multiple times, sipping his whiskey in the hotel room after a gig. He was so pissed at whatever that experience was.
No, I'm gonna pull up the quote. I'm gonna pull up the quote right now from Larry Vukovic, who's a great piano player who knew that. But I want to read you this quote because Jon Otis, even though we're sort of getting into the lineage of his family. This is from an interview I did with David Morgan from up in the Berkeley Hills, and I just want you to see if any of this resonates with you. He said, in 1975, I was playing with Ray Obiedo, and we were backing up this old soul singing group called the Ballads from Oakland. Back then, it was the Ballads, the Whispers, and the Natural Four. Those were the soul groups. We're in rehearsal, and all of a sudden they said, we have to stop the rehearsal now. And we go, why? And they said, we got to go check on our hose. We'll be back in an hour. They were all serious pimps when MacArthur Boulevard and San Pablo Avenue were packed with prostitutes. I was playing with the Ballads at the Seashell Lounge in Richmond, California on Hoffman Boulevard. This was before they even had a freeway out there. And you had to go up and down Cutting Boulevard, which was pretty dicey coming from Marin County.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I remember.
Okay, so I mean, is it fair to say that was an incubator for live gigs for you as well? I mean, this whole area of San Pablo and MacArthur. I mean, this is exactly the kind of vibe that I want. You know, I mean, to me, we've become so corporate and so rigid in our musical presentation live. In a lot of ways, it bothers the crap out of me. You know, and I wonder about those opportunities. You know, out of the quad. Once you started to play live, were these the kind of gigs? Were you backing up soul groups, and does that kind of resonate with you? Those kinds of stories of that time.
Actually, it was more in Berkeley on San Pablo Avenue where I got my start at a little club called the Long Branch on the corner of San Pablo and Dwight Way. And I was playing more with like local groups at that point, one called Grayson Street, one called Frank Biner and the Night Shift.
Oh, my God. Biner and the Night Shift. This is unreal, dude.
Yes, Frank and the Night Shift, yeah. That was more my school. The stuff that Dave did, I wasn't so into that circle of musicians, but I was just skirting their edge, basically. So I know exactly what you're talking about, but that wasn't really the scene I was in. Well,
I mean, but you and David are basically the same age, is that right? Or how does it break down there?
Dave's about 6 years younger than me.
He's younger than you. So I mean, because he used to play with this guy Funky Foot, this Kickin' Curtis Moore, who had a stuttering problem, and also like
I remember the name.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just trying to figure out what was Biner? I mean, Dyke and the Blazers, Johnny Talbot. I mean, I know you were too young to play with, but people think James Brown started funk music. No, it was Johnny Talbot that started funk music. Is that fair?
You know, I don't know enough about Johnny Talbot to actually say, but if that's your take on it.
No. He's it's just, you know what I look at it.
I know the music of John.
It's just the way I look at it is like when I think about Jon Otis, I'm like, if he lived in Berkeley, then he was hip to and this is my own, thing. I just assume that you were hip to everything going on in Oakland, everything going on in San Francisco, which is not true. I understand that it was like a regional thing.
Yeah. As a teenager, besides being into like Latin music, I was really into like rock. I really like British rock.
Yeah, well, why not? It was really hip stuff.
Kind of an eclectic. Yeah. So a lot of times, like things that my dad would say to me, like, if I said, "Oh man, I just heard this Jimi Hendrix record, I really dug it," and my dad would go, "Oh, that's just a bunch of noise." So we were kind of at odds on certain things, But I was listening probably more to, also Aretha Franklin, James Brown, that kind of stuff at that age. But I wasn't so into the R&B scene of Oakland, which was a really thriving live scene at that point. I was kind of skirting the edge of it.
Well, because Berkeley and Oakland are connected by the hip. It's just right there, and it was such a vital. It was such a vital time. It is confounding to me. I don't even want to go there right now. I have another voice to play for you. I hope you can get this one. But even so, I know it's going to bring a smile to your face, and we'll come back and break it down.
I'll bring it to the great conclusion. It'll be a great head. My grandmother was black, and she was a servant of the Palmieri's in the Hacienda Amelia in Puerto Rico in the 16th century. And she's the one that, because of her, which I dedicated a song for her called Yo Soy Mulato. When the African was brought in by the Spaniard, that mixture, intercultural mixture, came the mulatto. The mulatto put the world to dance with all the sufferings and beatings and any torture. We have no idea how cruel we can be to another human being. They put the world to dance with the drum. The drum in the song that I wrote is the pulse of my life. I mean, this is me now. This is the pulse of my life. And it started Afro-Cuban. Then it became Afro-Caribbean when Cuba influenced the United States and the Puerto Ricans in New York, like Tino Puente and Tino Rodriguez, because my Chino was Cuban. But that band started in 1939, and that was the band, the orchestra, with the great Rene Hernandez as an arranger. But those are the orchestras, that were here in New York City. So that made it Afro-Caribbean. Now it's Afro-world. There's not a place that I have traveled to, and I have done more than 1,000 concerts all over Europe, gone to Russia, Australia, various times, Tokyo, Singapore. I mean, we name it, in all of Europe, Denmark, in Norway, and Italy. You just name it, we were there. There's not one country that is not intrigued by the rhythmical patterns that are the most complex, the most exciting, and then the instruments like the conga, bongo, and timbales in the world. That's the overwhelming power of the music that the mulatto created and left us.
Jon Otis, you want to take a gander? Wow. You want to take a gander who that is?
Wow. Once again, that voice sounds so familiar, but
It's okay. There's no reason why you should know it, and but he is an elder statesman. And actually, when I in one of my interviews with Morgan, he said that you hipped him to this cat with records you were getting into, and this cat was Eddie Palmieri. That was from my interview with Eddie from December from 2015, and he told me some insane. I mean, this was the first dude to play the prison touring circuit, right? You had those Fania albums from all Sing Sing. I mean, this dude was going into the depths of I mean, he was playing this music, and so the Fania vibe. How is that different? Why did you get off on it? Because Morgan knew nothing about that until you started to bring those records over.
It was really by chance that I discovered all those records. Meeting Armando and then starting to get interested in Latin jazz and then Latin music and then really discovering Afro-Cuban music and then African rhythms. It was just kind of a stepping stone. And, it's hard to really, I'm actually more of a drummer, vocalist, steeped in basically rhythm and blues than I am a Latin player.
Absolutely.
But I got so into that stuff that I started to learn the congas, the bongos, and the timbales. And I'm such an eclectic person. It's hard for me to kind of.
Yeah, so am I, dude. So I'm a really eclectic cat myself. But I just what I'm saying is, like, how did it? You were an R&B. I mean, that band Tuwaka, that would be an R&B blues band, kind of. It was. I mean, it was.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, that's what Peter Morgan told me, and yet there were like colors of James Brown and colors of Fania All Stars in there because you wanted to stretch out. I mean, when you incorporated that into your playing, how did it make you a better player?
Exactly that, by incorporating it into my playing. You just said it. Your question was the answer.
Yeah, right. The questions are the answers.
I was so inspired by what I heard that I just had to start incorporating it into what I was doing, and I've just basically continued on that way. And my experience with Latin music per se was kind of a window in my whole career. It wasn't like the thing that I totally ended up doing. It was something that I kind of dove into for a while and then came back out. But all of this riff. Make any sense?
Yeah, I mean it's just a lot to digest. I mean it's completely normal and I mean did you? Can you talk like, so Armando came up to you and said you're very precise. What was the word what did he say to you? You're very exact?
He said, you're precise playing, man.
You're precise. So did you actually go and take informal lessons, how close did you get with him?
Well, basically, David and I had this band with other great musicians from around the Bay Area called Salsa de Berkeley. I'm sure David talked to you about Salsa de Berkeley.
I'm upset.
Right?
Well, that was the thing I put up on Facebook. That was from our interview. He was talking about that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And we used to play at a club called the Reunion in San Francisco.
Whoa.
And many artists who were passing through town would come down to the Reunion after their gigs. And Armando would hang out quite a bit with us. Most of the time, he'd just sit there and kind of look at us kind of critically. But you can see he came again and again, so we knew that he was digging it. And then every now and then, when we'd really be smoking, he'd jump up on stage, push the conga drummer to the side, and start playing. And that was my real lesson with Armando. That was basically the lesson.
Oh my God, that is. Wait, so I mean, and Mingo Lewis was in the band as well. I mean, he wasn't pushing Mingo aside. It was, probably like Butch Haynes or something like that.
Mingo would play with us every now and then. Butch was more of a permanent member of the band, but we had a lot of different cats coming through the group. Mingo would pass through every now and then, but Butch was really a part of the band. And we had other great percussionists: Roger Scutero, Teddy Strong, Juan Carlos Miller, John Bendick. I know I'm missing a couple, but they'll come to me.
Yeah, no, you got it. You did it.
We were just we were like a workshop, actually. People would just pass through.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most amazing thing about the culture of, it was Berkeley, but it was really truly the grittiness of Berkeley, the idea that the culture and the music was right out on the street. I mean, I feel, that you guys started playing on the street, and that to me...
On the street.
And that is like... That was going on in every regional section of this country, and that stuff has been pushed off the street now into clubs. And I ask you this very seriously. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about when you noticed this change in. I'll be very clear. I mean, I still try to hold up today that all music is danceable, and I want to believe that. In live music, I always want to let the body dance. I mean, maybe if it's a symphony orchestra or some opera, maybe that's not appropriate. But when did we become, as a cult, in Western society, obsessed with people's facility and chops, where we sit and stare as opposed to letting the body dance? Because now you go to shows. You go to shows. I mean, you go to a Tower of Power show, and people are sitting down. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. When did that happen?
Yeah. I think it actually happened a long time ago, and then maybe it's just finally. I think it's always been there. I think it actually started with European classical music, really, of the sit down, listen, be quiet, applaud at the end kind of idea. I think it all started with classical music. If there's somebody out there who's more of an expert on it, let me know. But that's my take on it. And I think what you're talking about is just different phases of musical development that we've lived through in our lives, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, I have people in half-filled...
I think it just carried over. That's a good question, and I'm not really sure what's going on now, because that band like Tower of Power, people should be jumping up and dancing.
Well, I mean, it's just, again, it's like... I mean, it's supposed to be, I feel like, none of you guys, I know, of course, it was quite amazing. Did you go to Berkeley High? Did you go to the same school as David Morgan?
Yeah.
So
I graduated from Berkeley High in 1971.
All right, so you had these such beautiful alternative art programs in the high school. Herbert Mims was a huge influence on Morgan because they'd bring in the rhythm section. they bring in the rhythm section from the Whispers. I mean, that's the best school you could possibly have. And, you know, nowadays... Yeah.
Can I share something with you?
Dude,
my
stage
go. Band had a visit from Duke Ellington.
Wait, I'm sorry. Which band had it? Which band?
My Berkeley High School stage band.
Oh, please tell me that story. Please tell me that story.
Yeah. Duke was playing at Zellerbach, which is the University of California concert hall. He was playing there that evening. Our stage band teacher asked Duke to come visit our stage band class that day. He showed up and scared us. I mean, you know, we were totally honored, but we were just shocked to walk into the stage band class and have Duke Ellington sitting there. And then we had to play for him.
Oh, my God.
And he sat there very calmly smiling and gave us a little applaud after and told us, keep up the good work. And it was just such an exciting experience just to have him there.
Is there a way, I mean, because, you know, today, if you have the money, you can go, music is being made in the academy today where you go to college. I mean, Juilliard in 65 did not have a jazz program. Even in the early 70s, Berkeley and North Texas State, that was about it. The vocabulary of music was being created on the street. And I just wonder, you know, even from what you could glean from your father, your experiences playing live with him, and just your other experiences, do you honestly feel that new musical vocabulary can be created within academia? You guys had it in high school to a degree, but like you were able to, like as far as I was following David, I mean, he went on a different track. Like you were actually able to go to an arts high school and do all this stuff so that you could eventually walk out. It was considered a career. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is the idea that do you believe younger cats now? I mean, not established people like Tower of Power. They're playing whatever. They're picking and choosing their gigs, and they're making a lot of dough, and that's cool. But they're a known entity, and I just wonder about, in your mind. And Berkeley's a perfect example because of the insane gentrification and the pushing out of different populations. Do you still believe that our society looks at a musician as a profession, or music is a musician's gift to the world?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. But, you know, I just was thinking about the whole thing you were just asking me. And I think academics is a good place to get a solid foundation, but I'm not really seeing it as a place to foster innovation. You know, I'm not seeing a lot of innovation coming out of those places, but I have to give credit to the academics for at least giving a foundation for understanding the history, understanding, you know, what's going on today in the music and getting an idea of where it could go. But I'm not really seeing a lot of innovation. Maybe if somebody could step up and show me, that would be great.
Well, I mean, a lot of the innovation, I think, is coming through non-human means like technology, beats, loops, people creating inanimate, stuff. I mean, any good music requires...
But that's more technical. That's technical innovation.
Absolutely.
That's not really creative innovation.
Well, my question... So here's...
I'm not saying that technical innovation is not creative. It is. But it's a different kind of creative. We're talking about music. So, you know, the technical innovations that have helped to create more kind of electronic music is not exactly a musical innovation. I'm not hearing a lot of musical innovation going on. You know, I'm ended up listening. I'm constantly searching new stuff and things that, you know, that I can really be inspired by, and I keep ending up back in blues and jazz.
Exactly.
Older stuff. Over and over again. And there's a lot of good contemporary jazz too, don't get me wrong. But I end up going back because I'm not finding anything that is showing me the way forward right now by any contemporary music coming out. I'm hearing a lot of rehashing, and I'm probably guilty of it too. And you know, I'm not the one who's saying I'm the innovator, but I wish I was. And maybe I am, but
No. You're. Listen. Part of the problem is that when you come out of universities, you sound just like your professor. So there's a homogenization of sound. You don't. Cleanhead Vincent, Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, or all the great drummers. You could tell right away who it was. So the individuality of sound was paramount, and you could, and this is the other thing, is that our media today is so one-dimensional, and they're gonna music in my mind today, pop music. Because I mean, listen, when you guys say what you want, I mean, in '74 when Salsa de Berkeley was cooking the groove, I mean, dude, the pop music of the day was fantastic. In some, Joni Mitchell and Steely Dan, and there was so much. I mean, a lot of that had to do with all these beautiful people that were playing the music, like Joe Sample and John Guerin and Wilton. Those were all exactly. So even, I mean, today all you get now is pop music that is pacifying to people. It's made for pacification or multitasking. So it's like the spiritual. That's why I asked you about the out-of-body experiences, because, to me, I'm searching for that fine line, the connection of the mind to the body, and ultimately that's where the spirit emerges. That's what my whole show is about, is spirituality, how to create spiritual music. No formula trips. And I look at my generation and younger, and I see people very afraid to make mistakes. They want to play something perfectly, or they want to be incredibly wonkish about it, and they want to make something so complex that people don't even know what tune they're playing. So I don't have the answers for it, but I just wonder if you felt like if there was a pocket of time, and maybe it was Salsa de Berkeley, ultimately looking back on it, like, how important is it to remove your ego from the musical process and allow the spirit to take over? Because I know you guys were on the precipice of actually cutting an album, I think.
You sound like you've really thought about this probably a lot more than I have. And what's really popping up in my mind as you ask me that question, and it's not really answering your question.
You don't have to answer the question. You go anywhere you want. Yeah, it's fine.
What really turns me on from the time that I started playing music to this day is when people from different kinds of influences come together and make something new creative together.
Yep.
And that's you were just talking about, like, the 70s, how, these different really cool people would come together and make music. And I think that's really the exciting thing every time, is when people from different areas pull together and create something new.
I mean,
it might be a jazz musician, it might be a Latin musician, it might be a folk musician, it might be a classical musician, but when they all come together and create something, then we've got some really special things going on.
I want to read you this, I don't know, do you know the great jazz piano player Larry Vukovich? Was a mainstay in at the Keystone Corner and for many years, and he said to me, he goes, "Jake, were you aware that Cleanhead wrote the tune 4 and Tune Up? Miles ripped the whole tune from him and put his name on it. Miles was a great musician and band leader, but this is one trait that he had that was not good. He ripped Bill Evans for Blue and Green. He ripped Cleanhead, and he was trying to rip Benny Carter with When Lights Are Low. It's who else in that band? I mean, that dude is, when I think of, jazz as a essence music, a vibe music, that you don't get any heavier vibe than Cleanhead. I mean, who else was in that group, or who else had an influence on you? I mean, that's unbelievable.
That's true. Once again, I'm not, I think you know more about that than I do, so it's hard for me to answer that. But every time you bring up a question, it takes me back to different memories that I have. And this is just kind of a funny memory, that on the stage with Eddie Cleanhead Vincent, when I played with the Johnny Otis show with my dad back in the 70s, Eddie would pull a stool up near my dad's piano, and he would start a song, and he'd sing a verse or two, and then he'd pop his dentures out and throw it into his whiskey glass and take the most awesome alto solo.
Oh my God!
Those kind of experiences just make my memory like light up.
Yeah, you know why? Because you're looking at people that you idolized, and they're so human, and they just are so open. I think Pat Martino told me the same thing about possibly John Coltrane in the bathroom removing his teeth. Here it is. It's just, again, I don't spend time thinking about this. I'm asking Pete Escovedo and Bill Cosby and Jon Otis and everybody else about these things. I mean, this is, to me, like, this is not about preservation. It's about promotion. And through these magical memories that pop into your head, this is inspiring for so many people. No, I was just, did you ever, you were a trap drummer and a singer, and there was a great place in San Francisco called Jack's on Sutter, and they used to have these jam sessions there with Rudolph Johnson, Chester Thompson, the organ player who actually kicked pedals.
Oh yeah.
And and then the drummer was this guy who I've never been able to connect with, was Herschel Davis, and he used to sing R&B. They used to play the whole gambit, spiritual jazz, R&B, but he sang and played drums. And people don't realize how hard that is. I was able to sit at the write-off room I've seen the last couple of years up in Woodland Hills watching the great James Gadsden sing and play, and he makes it look so easy. And can you talk to cats about how you cultivated that because that is really similar to playing bass lines with your feet, because most people play with their left hand on the organ. How did you develop your chops as a singer and a drummer at the same time?
It's a really easy answer to this question, and it's just a couple of words, and it's basically keep it simple. When you have to sing, you have to keep the drum part fairly simple in order to be able to get all your inflections in for singing. When I rehearse, then I'm doing all the counting and stuff like that and trying to figure out what I'm doing. But when I'm actually playing, the counting part and all that stuff is kind of in the background. I should already know the music well enough when I'm performing it. It doesn't always happen, but most of the time, that's my take on it. And the keep it simple is just it. That's it. Keep it simple.
And so would you say like Tuaca was like the time when you were able to shed it pretty good when you learned that? Or when was the growing?
That was when I was really developing. I was developing myself in that period. That was still when we were in high school, and God, David was so young then. He was like 11 or 12.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
Were his parents driving you around to gigs with to play with Jeffrey Greer and those cats? You guys were playing.
They were driving him around to gigs. They were driving him around. Yeah. They were really sweethearts, by the way. David's parents were such sweethearts. They let us rehearse at their house. David's mom made sure that we were fed.
Yeah, the beef stroganoff, man. The beef stroganoff was cooking all day.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, my mom was like that too. Gladys Moffett, my mom was just like that too. We used to rehearse a lot at my house too, with different bands that I had. And my mom would always make sure that there was some food for all the musicians. The musicians just loved coming to my house.
Oh, I love it, dude. That's so cool, man. Because that's the way it used to be. I remember Mickey Roker, his mom, it would be on Sundays, and she'd let them have these, jam sessions at the house. And these other women would be like, why are you letting your son play all that devil's music, that ridiculous music? And she's like, hey, at least I know where my son is. That was a place.
Exactly.
It's like it just was a beautiful. Okay, so I just wanted to get your, my show revolves around the 4 L's, and I'd like you to talk about your concept of leadership. What are the qualities of leadership that you find a lot? And I'll be very honest with you. In my mind, a leader is somebody who, especially on the bandstand, takes their accompanists or people down pathways they wouldn't normally go down. And so that's just one thing, but I wanted to ask you what your concept of leadership is, and what you still, what you still use today to motivate people.
Yeah, my concept of a good leader is someone who can give the band a good outline of what we're about to do, whether it's a tune or a set or a concert or a concept, and then that's a real important part of the leadership quality for me, is that just letting the band take it there after you've given them the guideline of where you're trying to get it to go. That's one. And then on another practical level, a great leader is a leader who shares the success of the band with the whole band. That might mean, actually sharing the money equally.
Exactly. No, I dig, man. I dig.
Just taking a little cut for whatever the leader had to do organizationally. So those two things really stand out for me. Treating the musicians equally, letting them share in the successes, and giving them good guidelines and trusting them. Take it there.
You bring them in so that they can do what they do. You don't micromanage that.
Exactly. That's a good leader for me.
Was your dad that kind of leader?
He pretty much knew exactly what he wanted, and he would just tell me what he wanted. And he showed me, because I was pretty green when I started with him, so he would show me exactly what he wanted. So he was a different kind of leader. That was a really good lesson, too, for me. I'm not putting that lesson down, but he wasn't really, from my point of view, the ideal leader, even though it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a different school of learning that. The point is, he put some money in your pocket. Like he paid you for the gig, and there are some people.
Absolutely.
Like there are cats that. To me, it's also about respect, and I wonder, like, when you got to know Shuggy, did he? Where was he at in his trajectory? Because if you listen back to some of the stuff that he did on Epic Records, that is like some kind of direct lineage to Jimi Hendrix in some ways. And I wonder how your brother handled, I don't want to say fame, or your half-brother, how did he deal with that? Sometimes people get success very quickly, and they get it too early, and it's too much. And I just wonder how you feel about how the path that it wasn't like he planned it, but how did he handle that fame and because he has almost a folkloric still today. There's some sort of spirit about him, and I wanted you to just riff on that any way you wanted.
Yeah, well, he definitely was influenced by Jimi Hendrix, but he's enough of his own musician that he pretty much took it to where he wanted to take it to. And I'm not really sure if Hendrix knew of him, because I think Hendrix was already gone.
He was gone by that, definitely gone, yes.
By the time, yeah. So Shuggy definitely was influenced by Hendrix, but he was influenced by a lot of people. One thing that I remember meeting, the first time I met my brother, Shuggy, he had a little stack of these mini scores of classical composers. They were these little books of scores of different classical pieces, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. And he was studying these little mini scores, and that so impressed me, just that alone.
What was it like in a live setting with him? Because the records that he did are kind of tailored for radio-friendly play. Was he someone that could really just stretch and just play bar after and just never repeat any ideas?
Oh my God, Shuggy is such an incredible soloist, such an incredible musician. Shuggy brought me more than one time, literally to tears. He was playing so incredible. Oh. It's just like tears start flowing. It's just like unexpected. You don't even know why. Here we are on the stage playing for thousands of people, and all of a sudden, like, tears are rolling down my face in the middle of his guitar solo. It's like, whoa, Sugar, where did all of that come from?
Damn.
What an incredible artist.
You look back on it now, all your half brothers. How often do you see them, collaborate with them? Are you guys are on all good terms? Where does that all stand today? I think you guys are. I just more and more now. It's like I'm not even directing this at you. I'm directing it at cats who are interested in having serious places where there are like venues. People that have dough have to step up and create their own venues, and if they want to have really good, vibrant live music the way you guys were raised, then I just feel like it's more important than ever before to be accessible to younger cats, because I just interviewed Rick Laird from Mahavishnu Orchestra, and his first gig really was at Ronnie Scott's, and like Wes Montgomery would come in for a month, or Anita O'Day would come in for a month, or Sonny Rollins would come in for a month. Can you imagine? It was the best school in the world, but those things don't really go down anymore. And so it's a two-part question. How often do you, how close are you with your siblings? And also how are you trying to give back in 2020?
Right. Well, I'm really close with my brother, Nick. I saw him last week. We're practically daily in contact with each other, and we hang out a lot, and we actually have a gig coming up in June together.
What?
Where it's kind of a new phase for us. We've been playing with this idea for years, an Otis Brothers kind of a band, and we're finally sitting there, just the two of us, to actually pull this off in June. And so I see Nick a lot. I don't see Shug much. You know, I live in the Bay Area, and Shuggy lives in the Los Angeles area. And in the last years, he hasn't been very active because of some health issues that he's having. And so I'm not that close with Shuggy. We played together in 2013. Also, Nick, my brother Nick, was in the band playing drums. I was playing percussion. But I haven't really seen Shuggy since then. And Shuggy's two sons, Eric and Lucky, who are both incredible musicians, I've also had experience playing with them, but I don't see them much because they're both also in LA. And I brought it up more than once. Let's put an Otis band together. And we tried a couple times, and we just never quite got there. So I'm really excited that at least Nick and I are now on the path to put something together ourselves, and hopefully we'll pull in some more family members along the way.
Well, I mean, they're not direct family, but it'd be great to get the Morgan brothers up on the bandstand.
That would be incredible. That would be
It's just like, you guys are like the salt of the earth people, man. It's okay. So before I let you go here, we wrap up part one here with Jon Otis. What is your concept of love, and how do you bring love to the world?
I would say my music is the closest concept of bringing love to the world that I have. It's my one platform where I actually get on a stage and play for people I don't know all over the world. And that's basically what I try to spread. It's not even that I try to spread that. I just feel that the music is that kind of energy. So whenever I have a chance to perform my music or even someone else's music on a stage, I feel like that's what I'm doing. I'm spreading it. I'm spreading that love.
Rhythm is love, man. So that's pretty spot on. And we just
Yes,
we just cooked here for 70. Yeah, go ahead.
Jake, let me just say something. You started this whole thing off with the angle on Salsa de Berkeley and Latin and Caribbean music, and we didn't really talk a lot about that because a lot of my roots are in what we just more spoke about, which was blues and jazz. Not to leave the Latin part out. It's a really super important part of what I do. It was a window when I was really active doing that, and it hasn't been that much of what I have been doing in the last year. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, no, first of all, this whole thing, it's just about adding more vocabulary to it. And, the reality is that you've been painting on your palette for a long time, and it will continue. It's been a very diverse legacy, and I would be honored if that date gets locked in to come see the Otis brothers rock. Let the body dance and have a ball.
I'll keep in touch with you and let you know what's
Yeah,
happening.
man, we can do part two as well. Maybe let Nick know that I'd love to catch a hang with him as well.
Yeah. Let's do it together, maybe with Nick the next time.
Yeah, it's hard. In the studio here. It's hard to get a three-way thing.
It's hard with two people.
It's just I don't have that three-way connection. But I mean, we need to do part two again. Do part two. This is we've just been cooking for 71 minutes here with Jon Otis. But thank you for making my day, man. It was a great way to ease into the 42nd year of my life.
What a pleasure, Jake, and thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to the second part.
Yo, man, we'll do it up, man. Have a beautiful day, man. I'll get this up later online. I'll be transcribing some stuff, and let's have a ball.
Thanks so much, man.
Be cool, man. Care. Later on. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Just another whistle stop. Jon Otis, the legend. That's it for now. This is the Jake Feinberg.